I'm okay. Good evening. It's good to see all of you here this evening. As you see, I brought Jana with me this evening. Certain novelist tells how the government put the peasants to work building roads during the Great Depression in Ireland. Delighted to have a job again, they worked energetically, singing along with zest, until one day they realized what was happening. The road they were working on or building did not go anywhere. It just rambled out into the countryside and stopped in the midst of nowhere. The road was useless. The government had put them to work just to give them something to do. The song stopped, the workers became listless. He then observed, the roads to nowhere are difficult to make. For a man to work and sing, there must be an end in view. The same is true of a church. We must have a goal, a purpose for being here. Ask yourself, what is your aim in life? What is your one great dream that gives your life direction, significance, and a sense of purpose? Have you checked in with God to see if your master ambition is as big as the one He has chosen for you? We need to be careful about the target we choose. If we aim at nothing, we will hit the bullseye every time. Those things at which we aim or fail to aim speak volumes about us. Share our goals and aspirations in life, and others can evaluate your character and predict your destiny with a reasonable degree of accuracy. As we know, James and John were sons of Zebedee. One day they approached Jesus and asked him to give them the two top positions in his kingdom. One wanted to sit at his right hand, the other wanted to sit at his left hand. And commenting on this obvious, bold ambition to grab the positions of prestige and power in Jesus' kingdom, one commentator suggests this: the Lord, as usual, allows men to display their own spiritual depth or shallowness by disclosing their aims. For it is by his aims rather than by his achievements that a man stands judged. You know, goals are obvious. It is obvious that most people do not have any. At least they do not have specific, planned out, written down goals. Rare is the couple who has a written will. I don't have one. Some of you may have, but not most people. And rare still is the couple who have a written 1 year or 5 year plan for their marriage or family. They talk about planning for the future. They talk about starting a college education fund for their children. That worked out real well for us. They discussed the need for getting back into activity with the church. But it is soon forgotten because the plan is not concrete and specific. Their goal is to do nothing about goals, and they hit it every time. What about the church family? Where are our goals? No business, family, or church could survive by charting a course to nowhere. A company without definite purposes and plans for the future will have no future. There was an old woodsman who was known for his sharp shooting ability. He always seemed to hit the bullseye. And one day, a passerby asked how he was so uncannily accurate. And he replied, "Well, young man, I just shoot out into the woods. And if my bullet hits a tree, then I go up and draw a circle around the hole." You know, that is sometimes our temptation, isn't it? Having received little instruction or training in the all-important task of formulating and fulfilling specific plans for our lives, for the church, we have a tendency to draw a circle of resigned acceptance around whatever we happen to stumble up against in life. You know, most of the students on our university campuses today are looking for more from life than security, comfort, and luxury. Most of all, I think, they are searching for something to give meaning and significance to life. I believe the present generation of American youth is one of the finest our country has ever produced. They are better developed in body and better trained in mind than my own generation. But on the whole, they lacked one great essential. Many of them seem to have no high, compelling purpose. They have essentially lost touch with life as God intended it to be lived. Thus, a new term has crept into our language to identify this condition. This term describes a loss of the sense of who we are. It suggests dangling, no sense of purpose, scattered, unattached, no roots, adrift. Actually, the new condition is simply something that describes an old human condition. And Jesus responded to this undecided or scattered condition when he said, "No one can serve two masters." Elijah confronted the problem when he said to the nation of Israel, "How long will you hesitate between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, follow him." But the people did not answer him a word. 1 Kings 18, verse 21. Joshua faced the problem on another occasion when he said, "Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve." Joshua 24, verse 15. Peter also addressed the issue in the first gospel sermon, urging people to follow Jesus, to make him the center of their purposes. Peter said, "Save yourselves from this untoward generation." King James Version. Untoward. That's an unusual word, isn't it? Not many of us use it in our everyday language, do we? It literally means not going toward anything. Many people are living an untoward life. No direction, no purpose, no meaning. They're running on a treadmill. They're going fast, going often, but going nowhere. They're making a living, but not making a life. They're working for a paycheck, but finding little meaning in their work. What about the church? Why do we need to find meaning and direction and purpose in life? What is our supreme aim in life? Is it worth spending ourselves on? Paul lists some goals worth setting our sights on. He says, pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, perseverance, and gentleness, as he writes to Timothy in 1 Timothy 6, verse 11. If you're looking for some challenging goals that will stretch your soul and put spiritual muscle on every fiber and tendon of your being, devote your life to one or all of these goals. And if the time should come when there comes to be a challenge, when there comes a time or when these come to be a challenge to you, try this one. Aim for perfection. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 13, verse 11. Or be made complete, as the New American Standard says. That should keep us busy, shouldn't it? To aim for perfection? To strive to be made complete? What one goal in life does Jesus consider to be most urgent for our personal lives? Just listen to what he says in Matthew 6, verse 33. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. If we're looking for priorities, Jesus makes it pretty clear. The first thing we should seek is his kingdom and his righteousness. Everything else should be secondary. To submit to the rule of God, to be right and to do right, to glorify him in all that we do, to simply live God's way. It is through our pursuit of these goals that life becomes meaningful to us. The message of the Bible seems to be life itself must be centered around the quest for worthwhile ambitions. Zero in on the unique contribution you can make to the glory of God and the good of men. Define it, plan it, devote ourselves to it, work at it, and persevere in it. A sociology professor with an Italian heritage, when telling how he grew up, remarked, "When I would start off to school in the morning, my mother would push the screen door open and call out, 'Do you have your lunch pail?' Like all good Italian mothers, his mother made sure he never went hungry. He said a Jewish boy lived a few doors down. And when he started off to school, his mother would push the door open and call out, 'Isaac, do you have your books?' Food or books? It's an interesting contrast of priorities in two distinct ethnic cultures. Italians are devoted to food, and Jews are devoted to learning. In a world of bigotry and anti-Semitism, the Jewish people have risen to top positions in the professions and commercial enterprises in disproportionate numbers because, on the whole, they have definite objectives and relentless determination. Have you got your books? Ralph Waldo Emerson once said that the power of the Gulf Stream will flow through an ordinary drinking straw if the straw is placed parallel to the flow of the stream. Makes sense, doesn't it? The same is true of our lives. If we are lined up with God's purposes, if our plans have been conceived in His presence, then His power flows through us as we persevere in the doing of it. Goals help to focus our lives by concentrating efforts in a specific direction. It reminds one of the focused power of light that has been harnessed as a laser beam. Unlike normal beams of light that scatter their light delicately around the room, the laser beam is so focused that it can hit a 4-foot target as far away as the moon with precise accuracy. Think about that. It can cut a hole through a sheet of steel because its power is concentrated and focused. When you parallel your life, or when we parallel our life with the power of God, that power will flow through in amazing ways. You will amaze yourself and others at what you can do. Now, to Him who is able to do far more abundantly beyond all that we ask or think, according to the power that works within us. To Him be the glory in the church and in Christ Jesus to all generations forever and ever. Amen. So Paul writes in Ephesians 3, verse 20 and 21. Paul also tells Timothy in 2 Timothy 1, "For God has not given us a spirit of timidity, but of power and love and discipline." One must have a gleam in his eyes. You know, Moses was a meek, unassuming man until God put a gleam in his eye to accomplish the impossible goal of delivering his people from bondage to Egypt. When he first informed of Moses of his plan for his life, Moses thought he was inadequate for the task. But God convinced Moses that He would give him all the power he needed. Then Moses persevered with the gleam of relentless determination in his eyes, because he knew that he had the power of God. In a single-minded commitment to the purpose of freeing his people from slavery, Moses stood before Pharaoh. Moses, of course, as you know, grew up being Pharaoh's grandson. And so here he is, the powerful ruler of Egypt, and unflinchingly Moses demanded, "Let my people go." Pharaoh replied, "No." So God exercised His power through Moses to pollute the drinking water in Egypt by saturating it with blood and the stench of decay and rotting fish. Persevering in his plan, Moses appeared before Pharaoh the second time and demanded, "Let my people go." Again, Pharaoh responded, "No." Can't you see that gleam in Moses' eyes when he said again, "Let my people go"? The plague of blood is followed by plagues of frogs, flies, livestock disease, boils, hail, locusts, and finally the plague of death of every firstborn son in Egypt. Now Pharaoh's had enough. He is eager to let the Israelites go. He is ready to drive them out of the land. Moses delivered over 2 million people out of bondage because he was unstoppable with that gleam of his goal in his eyes. Do we have a gleam in our eyes? I can't say I do right now, in my left eye anyway. But let's look. Divided goals mean divided powers. Devote yourself to the doing of 101 good things. And very soon you will lack the ability to do any one of those things exceptionally well. Focus your mind and body on doing a single task, and notice how that tired feeling just weakens your body and drags you down is replaced by a sudden surge of vigor and power. Call that the single-eyed approach. Anything worthwhile takes time away from other projects. The world considers focused effort on one thing fanaticism. That's why some guys are called football fanatics. Some are called baseball fanatics because they cannot think about anything else. And some can be called hunting fanatics. They would rather hunt than do anything else. But the biblical concept is just the opposite. It is a single-eyed view. Therefore, prepare your minds for action. Keep sober in spirit. Fix your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Peter writes in 1 Peter 1, verse 13, when Jesus suggests the need to have a single-eyed approach to life in Matthew 6, verse 22, he is simply showing us the need to bring our two eyes into focus. The metaphor suggests that you are cross-eyed when you have one eye on God and the other on the pleasures of the world. No one can serve two masters. One has to discipline himself to reach his goal. Do you want to win at this game called life? Paul puts the thought in these words in 2 Timothy chapter 2, beginning with verse 3. Suffer hardship with me as a good soldier of Christ Jesus. No soldier in active service entangles himself in the affairs of everyday life, so that he may please the one who enlisted him as a soldier. Also, if anyone competes as an athlete, he does not win the prize unless he competes according to the rules. The hardworking farmer ought to be the first to receive his share of the crops. Notice how many times in these verses Paul refers to the concept of discipline and the rewards of discipline. He talks about hardship, soldiers, athletes, the victor's crown, rules, the hardworking farmer, and his share of his crops. All these things require self-control, hard work, and discipline. They require focusing attention on one goal and concentrating our efforts or your efforts until you reach that goal. Then and only then does the reward come. Only the soldier who concentrates on being a soldier pleases his commanding officer. Only an athlete who follows the rules wins the victor's crown. And only the farmer who works hard will receive his share of the crops. That's how life really is, isn't it? But you see, goals bring harmony. You know, there's nothing more beautiful to me than sweet, close quartet harmony. And there is nothing more disturbing than discord. Just so, goals bring harmony to one's life. Musicians sometimes write music that contains a dissonance. You have two notes that are right next to each other, and when you hear them clash, you say, "Oh man, that hurts." But when that chord resolves back into sweet harmony, you say, "Oh, that's nice." Discord is the feeling you get when somebody runs their fingernails across a blackboard and cold chills run down your spine. It's grating and uncomfortable. And our life can feel that way too. You feel discord in your life when you are allowing yourself to be pulled in too many directions at one time. When you feel like you've been pulled off course, it is disconcerting. When you feel like you are not making progress toward your ultimate goal, it grates on your nerves like an unresolved chord. The pull to get off course is not just between good and bad. Sometimes it is between good and good. For instance, how should I personally glorify God today? Should I use today to study God's Word, or go out and share what I already know with someone else? Perhaps I should go work in the church benevolent center today, or should I go visit at the hospital or the nursing center? Which of the hundreds of things I can do to glorify God should I do first? You see, the problem is I cannot do them all, so I have to choose. I have to set priorities and goals and then decide what to do on that basis. Paul knew that we Christians would be wrestling with the tough problems of priorities day by day. He knew too that its only adequate solution would be found in the wisdom and power of God. Therefore, we find him praying in our behalf. And this I pray, that your love may abound still more and more in real knowledge and all discernment. In Philippians 1, verse 9. You know, you have to figure out where you're going. If you decide, and Larry and Rita aren't here, but they decided to go to Maine, okay? But if you decide you're going from Washington, D.C. to New York, then you know what to do to get there, right? You do not have to worry about Miami or Dallas or Los Angeles anymore. They have no relevance to your destination unless you're flying from here to Denver. You have to fly to Dallas, then you fly to Salt Lake City, and then you go to Denver. And that's the way it's always been for some reason. Even if you're only going to Grand Junction, you have to go to Salt Lake City. And that's way west of your destination. But you will not be pulled in all those different directions anymore because they just do not fit in with your goal. I'm going to Washington, D.C. or I'm going to New York City. Few men in recent history have influenced the lives of millions like Gandhi of India. His goals were simple and his lifestyle was simple. But how can you explain the power and the influence possessed by this man? If you don't know who Gandhi is, please look him up. Not only in his own country, but throughout the world, he had great influence. By concentrating and focusing his mind and body on one thing, and by persevering toward his goal with discipline, he reaped the power and rewards of his single-minded efforts. Thoreau, the poet philosopher, said, "Let your matters be as one or two." Thoreau's lifestyle was so simple that he lived on 37 cents a week. It is easy to see that he was not a man mastered by his possessions. By not expending his mind and energy on the accumulation of things, he was able to pursue the goals that were vital to him with greater concentration and power. When Jesus died, he did not have a very big wardrobe. In fact, he only had one possession for which the Roman soldiers were willing to roll their dice: his seamless robe. You see, Jesus lived a simple, goal-directed life. How should I select goals and priorities for my life? God did not create us as a mass of robots, but as intelligent, distinctive, and creative individuals with a purpose and endowed with special gifts. God has as many unique plans as he has unique people. No detail of heredity or environment, of temperament or talent is left out. He has uniquely supplied you for some special task in the accomplishment of his purposes. The acceptance of this challenge is intensely personal. The Bible tells us in Proverbs chapter 2, verses 3 through 6, "For if you cry for discernment, lift your voice for understanding. If you seek her as silver and search for her as for hidden treasures, then you will discern the fear of the Lord and discover the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding." You know, we all know the story about the turtle and the rabbit, right? The old rabbit had a high IQ of his legs, okay? He could just run like crazy. And the old turtle had been shortchanged in the legs, and even his running style was more of a creep than a run. But he could plod and persevere and was disciplined and determined enough to do just that. When the race began, as we know, the rabbit leaped out from the starting blocks, kicked dust in the face of his competitor, the turtle, and soon left him behind, so far behind that he decided to stop for a rest. He would run a while, rest a while, run a while, rest a while. But the old turtle just kept plodding along the course until he passed the napping rabbit near the finish line and won the race. The church, as you know, gets its work done with volunteer labor. And this means that when there is a specific job to do, you've got to use those animals whom you can find. I'm sorry I called you animals. And who are willing to accept the harness. The 10-talent rabbits can cover a lot of territory and get a lot done in a hurry. But they're hard to find, and when you do find them, they are usually so wrapped up in other activities that they are reluctant to accept the bridle. if it were not for the turtles who accept those unglamorous jobs that consume your time and tie you down for long periods of time, not much work in the church would ever get done. Right? And if anyone in the church deserves to be honored, it is those disciplined turtles who are determined to persevere until the task is complete. Whatever your gift or gifts may be, just give it to the Lord and let Him use it to accomplish His purposes and plans. We know that at age 12, Jesus had a compelling plan and purpose for His life. I can remember when I was 12, all I wanted to do was turn 13, because then I would be called a teenager, right? Big teenager. But what did Jesus consider to be most vital for His own unique and distinctive life? He replies, I must be about my Father's business. Doing God's work. That was Jesus' goal from the age of 12 until He whispered with His last breath of life from the cross, it is finished. But was it really? Were all the sick people healed? Were all the hungry people fed? Did He mean that there was no more work that God wanted to be done? No. But what He came to do, He did. It was finished. And what about when it's our turn to go? What if the garage has not been cleaned out? And what if there's still stuff under the bed? Stuff that you hidden there and you don't know it's there. What if the flower bed hasn't been weeded? And the roses need spraying? So, who cares? If what you came to do, you did, then you can say, it is finished. You must learn to say, I have come to do my Father's will. Just as Jesus said. And then do it. The church must be able to say, I came to do my Father's will, and then do it. We must have a purpose. We must have a direction. We must desire to do His will in all matters. Don't let us be like the peasants who were making a road that led to nowhere. But let us rather let us look to God. Look to His instructions and His directions, or whatever word we must use to describe what He has taught us in His Word. Let us use them to do His will in all that we do. And let us ask Him each and every day what it is He wants us to do this day. We know, of course, what we do on the first day of the week, don't we? But in my experience, that's not where it stops. We should be willing to do God's will and to finish His will in our lives. Lesson is yours, and if there's anyone who needs to respond to the invitation of putting Christ on in baptism, because That's where it begins as Christian. And then, after being baptized, one needs to be taught fully and completely the teachings of Christ. Matthew 28, verse 20. And if there's anyone who needs to come and put Christ on in baptism, we invite you to come now as we stand and as we sing.